So the end of May update, there will be a Barkbeetle update at the end of the video. Jump to like 8 minutes if that's all you're interested in. The container that was bought some years ago, that was the secure storage before the garage was built, had kind of shifted on the support we had made for it, so we wanted to get that a little bit more upright and pulled it with the excavator and added an extra support against one of the trees next to it. The excavator will need to be used some this summer. We have issues with the diesel heater that it doesn't really want to start. I think the pump lets some fuel through, so it's kind of full of fuel when you try to start it. We used to have a valve. We've added this container you see here as an extra fuel tank for it, so it doesn't have to suck from the tank itself. But we had issues with leaking petcock on the tank, so we just added a 90-degree elbow down there. Then the issues started, so we are adding a fuel valve here, just so we can shut it off if it's not used. Also wanted to add a voltage gauge to the machine because the alternator makes some funny sounds, so I think it will be worth keeping track of it. Going from underneath the battery box, it was possible to feed a wire up there and kind of fish that up, and then just pull a wire up there, and then feeding it through kind of this wiring channel in the frame down here over towards the cab. We ran into a stop here because we kind of needed to remove the plate under the cab and didn't have tools for that. Checked the oil in the track gearbox. One side was a little low and the other one had pressure built up inside it, so I got a little bit sprayed with oil. That happens a lot when you have just old machines. The forest car had issues. The battery was dead. It had not been sitting that long, and it has a main switch, but that was not turned off. And I think the indicator on it was like activated, and that maybe draw some current even if it wasn't blinking where it was sitting with the ignition off. Made a little aluminum bracket for the voltage gauge before heading back out of some scrap aluminum. Tools enough to remove the plate, and found a hole where we could feed up a wire and get the cable up there. And with the wire up to the cab, it was time to install the voltage gauge. It used to be like a phone holder up there that we removed. We have a circuit breaker on it since some years. We also had battery issues, and it had a 12-volt radio on it, and they just hooked the radio up to one of the batteries, and I think that caused issues. Voltage gauge plate bolted in place. It's not a pretty install, but it's functional. And with it in place, this is not really suited for outdoor use, I think, so we'll see how long it lasts. But this was some cheapo stuff I had laying around in the garage since some other project. Double checked that I had a good ground point up in the cab, so I didn't need to run a wire all the way back to the battery, and the plate could be bolted back up. The machine was started and moved around. We're gonna look at the valve block for the track and see if that could be the issue, that one of the track motors feels weak, because in the previous video we tried switching the hoses and the weak motor felt a lot stronger, so the problem is not the motor itself. We also filled up a little oil in that gearbox that was a little low. One of the brush cutters had failed. The clutch would not disengage. It's a Stihl FS450. You need to remove the bottom plate and the pull starter to be able to undo the housing above it. I'm not entirely sure you need to remove this. I think you need to remove the bolts. Maybe you could have disassembled it without doing this, but I needed to get access to the clutch and was in a hurry and didn't look at any manual. I started undoing bolts. So I was able to get it apart, and I found pieces of spring in there because there are two springs that hold the clutching engagement in place, and everything is toast in here. So I have ordered new parts, but needed to pull it further apart to ensure, because the bearing here felt bad. I think we replaced the gearbox, angled gearbox at the end of the shaft some years ago on this machine, and this bearing up here is bad, and the plastic guide for the drive shaft also have seen better days. Was eventually able to pull that plastic guide out. That's a very inexpensive part, so I'm gonna replace it, even if it could probably have been used with cleaning it up and doing some trimming. It had metal debris in there. I think both the seals on the bearing had been pushed out. I did not have a circlip plier with long enough jaws to get in there and undo a circlip down here, but grinding away some material, my short circlip pliers was able to undo a circlip here, and the clutch drum could be hammered out. It was a little hard getting it out, partly because I couldn't get a good support. I'm gonna replace the clutch drum, and here I could confirm that this bearing is absolutely toast. I got sick of this part being stuck to the throttle cable, and there is a slit there, and with a little bit of wiggling I could force out the throttle cable from the housing itself and get better support, so I could get the bearing out. Everything is ordered for that. Now a barkbeetle update, because some of the material I've collected from that windfallen trees that's sitting on the forwarder right now, that has seized some attack. And I also decided to check all the traps. We did get the end of the May was cold and rainy, so hopefully that will slow them down, and I hope it continues, that we never see above 10 degrees Celsius. But I think we'll get warmer weather. Here is the catch from 15 traps. I'm filling up a jar that I'm gonna put in the freezer, because I have a few people that don't believe that I catch barkbeetle this far up north, but I do, sadly. I will. The majority of this was from 4 of the traps, so I have some areas that are far worse than others, but I will in a couple of weeks have to start searching for trees that are losing their colors if they are attacking standing trees this year also, and I will also have to give it a bit of a search if I have any more windfallen fresh trees around. So that's the end of May. Hopefully June will be cold and rainy. Hope everyone out there has a good summer so far. Over and out.